Greetings. I want to take a few minutes and just mention some of the material from your textbooks. I won't really be discussing the textbooks that much in any of these videos, but I did want to point out a few items. First, if we move our attention to Professor Fine's book, Human Rights and Wrongs, Slavery, Terror, and Genocide, what Dr. Fine starts off in Chapter 1, distinguishing among human rights and human wrongs, is presenting a theory, trying to take a look at the how and why groups end up supporting or denying other people and groups their human rights. And she looks at cooperation and competition as kind of the background factors operating related to conflicts over resources, status, power, and conducts an analysis within and between groups. She also points out that rights are a social construct and that rights are claims or duties by one group toward another. And in the text, she looks at life integrity rights, civil and political rights, and subsistence rights. So she differentiates this. Table 1.1 on page 6 looks at life integrity rights and their violations. So you begin to get some models already right away, and I think that's very helpful to begin with. And also the idea that rights can be violated by states, societies, and organized non-state and anti-state actors, and that's a quote from page 7. And then she moves to asking some basic questions and also looking at assumptions underlying societies and human rights. 3 major questions she asks: who belongs, who rules, and how is labor recruited and work that people do rewarded as well as exchanged. And then on page 18, she has some relevant questions, which I also recommend using in case studies and your comparative analysis. On page 19, table 1.2, the assumed preconditions and issues underlying types of life integrity violations. I think, again, very useful to begin to conceptualize human rights violations. Chapter 2 looks at 20th century slavery within the state, focuses on several countries such as Sudan as well as India. And then Chapter 3, slavery, trafficking, and globalization. I think that chapter is really an excellent example of a comparative analysis. And in that particular chapter, she compares trafficking and human rights violations and policies and the nature of trafficking and how it's addressed, comparing and contrasting Israel and Thailand. So that's a really useful chapter to give you an excellent example of a comparative analysis. So that is helpful. Then in your other textbook here, Crime, Justice, and Human Rights, Professors Weber, Fishwick, and Marmo, just to mention a few items from chapters 1 and chapters 2. Chapter 1 starts off with looking at human rights as rules and standards about how governments and populations should behave, and that's a quote from page 5, to kind of, again, look at the definitions and conceptualizations of human rights. And then the authors point out Dunbar's work on 4 ideal types of views of the nature of human rights: the natural school, the deliberative school, the protest school, and the discourse school. And we will see this whole model as a chapter later on in this textbook. And then also we'll note that we'll be reviewing different human rights instruments, and I've posted on the home page, as well as I will post a link to some of the major documents. One big question that's debated is whether or not human rights are universal. And so we'll see that come up again and again, and is there a middle road regarding that? In Chapter 2, the authors focus on international human rights law And in that chapter, you get a really nice description of the United Nations, describing how the United Nations operates, how human rights come into being, how they're evaluated, how human rights treaties are presented, what they contain, and discussion of different models and different treaties, and the ratification process, and the monitoring systems. And that's discussed, and later on we'll see that the International Criminal Court becomes a very relevant topic of discussion as related to human rights as well. So that just kind of gives you some ideas there, really getting us started. But I think one of the nice things is, and especially in Professor Fine's book, just superb examples of case studies and comparative analysis. So not only is this a wonderful book, and this is also a wonderful book as well, but this really will help you significantly, I think, and you can use it as a model for your case studies and your comparative analysis. And I know a lot of times students ask, well, where do I find information? You just want a comparative analysis. What do you mean by that? Or a case study, what do you mean by that? And I'll go over that in more detail in some other videos that I'll be making. But a lot of the examples that are very helpful are in this book and throughout the entire text as well. And this wraps up this video. Thank you.